Good morning and afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome everybody to day 3 of our Nonprofit Youth Services Talent Management Summit with today's session, practicing protecting vulnerable populations through proper talent management. As you all probably know, I'm Max Smith. I'm the Communications Director with 501c Services. We're a 100% employee-owned company, and we provide full-service unemployment outsourcing programs and other HR-related services to more than 3,000 nonprofits worldwide. A couple of our programs include the 501c Agencies Trust, which is a unemployment program, and 501c HR Services, which is an HR service program. Many of you on today's webinar are already working with us, and we really appreciate working with you. I'm going to cover our typical housekeeping real quick before I turn our session over to our guests. As you all know, you can post questions throughout the event. Please don't wait until the end. Mitru and Lori will be able to pause throughout and answer questions as they go. So if they say something and you want clarification or want them to drill a little bit deeper into it, please let them know. A lot of you all here today are here for some HRCI insurance credit. We will have a post-event poll popping up once we close the event. You'll need to fill that out for me. Tell us how we did and tell us which certification credit, one or the other or both, that you're looking for. That poll will also be included in a post-event email. The slides for today's program are already in the handout section of your GoToWebinar browser, so you can go ahead and dig those up right now. We will also email them to you later today in our post-event email. So this morning, I'm going to send this control over to Lori while I talk. Hopefully I can do two things at once. This morning, we have two great presenters from our friends at Boys and Girls Club of America. We've been a partner of Boys and Girls Club for almost 15 years now. We provide every Boys and Girls Club in the country with additional HR assistance. And today we are joined by our friends Mitru and Lori at BGCA, and they're going to share some of their expertise with us. Good morning, ladies. How are you all doing?
Good morning. I'm doing very well. Thank you. Thank you for having us here today. And thank you for calling out our longtime partnership. No kidding. I tell Maureen and Sonia all the time, you know, 501c Services, I call you part of our extended safety team, and that is not an exaggeration. So, and thank you, everyone. It's so great that we can actually be together today. It's our pleasure to support the summit on nonprofit youth services talent management. So I will introduce myself. My name is Mitru Ciarlante, and I'm a National Director of Child Safety and Quality Assurance with Boys and Girls Clubs of America. I've been with BGCA for 8 years. Previously, I spent what felt like a lifetime in the victim and survivor advocacy movement, building programs and policies and building the capacity of professionals, including youth serving organization, to recognize and to act when we see that youth have been exposed to some kind of violence or victimization. So it's been my honor, and it's been an amazing experience to bring that work to the Boys and Girls Club movement and to youth serving organizations, so that we can all of us, people who are there in the lives of children on a day-to-day basis, can really be present and be able to recognize when youth need more from us, when something might be going on. And Lori, I wanted to let you know I see one of your reminders in the slides, so we might not be on slide view. We might be on desktop view. I want to check. But I also wanted to just let you know that in my work now with Boys and Girls Clubs of America, Child and Club Safety Team, what we do is there are a whole team of us around the country. We have 6 regional directors, and we have other quality assurance folks in the safety team who do assessments, and but we are positioned to help support local organizations and be their safety consultants as they continue to grow. And this has allowed us to bring trauma-informed and preparedness and a wide range of different types of safety improvements and resources to 68,000 adult staff and 457,000 volunteers working in Boys and Girls Clubs. So I'm also pleased to introduce my co-facilitator, who is a member of the team as well. Lori?
Great. Hi, Mitru, and hi, everyone. And Mitru, is that better with my slides? I'm not sure what was going on, but hi, everyone. My name is Lori Huggins McGary, and I've been with Boys and Girls Clubs of America, both the national organization and the local organization, I feel like for my entire life. Almost 28 years, I've been working with local and national clubs at the national organization, but I actually was introduced to Boys and Girls Clubs by the youth development organization that I grew up with, that I volunteered with, and that I was a part of all through my elementary through college years, which was 4-H. So in every role that I've played in youth service organizations, I love to see the youth come alive in the programs. But I've always realized that it starts with safety. If youth don't feel physically and emotionally safe, then it doesn't matter what our programs offer, the impact is lost. That is why I joined the Club Safety and Quality Assurance team about a year ago to work with clubs in the Pacific region to ensure that all 467,000 youth that the clubs serve daily and the 4.6 million youth served per year have the opportunity to feel both physically and emotionally safe. So that's really what I'm passionate about. And so during our webinar today, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, or my video here. So during this session today, we're going to discuss the multiple layers of safety measures that youth service organizations really utilize to mitigate risk. And that includes emotional and physical safety and security, reputation and public trust, and civil and criminal liability. We're going to talk about the culture of safety as the foundation for youth service organizations. That's really so key, that it starts with the culture of the organization and the prevalence of safety in that organization. And then the next step is that screening, selection, and monitoring of staff and volunteers. We're also going to discuss special considerations when minors are serving as interns, staff, and volunteers. And throughout today's webinar, we're also going to highlight a wide variety of resources. So let me tell you more about our commitment to safety. Safety has always been our priority, and we know it's critical in achieving our mission. The mission of Boys and Girls Clubs is to enable all young people, especially those who need us most, to reach their full potential as productive, caring, responsible citizens. We came to realize that to achieve our mission, we had to move safety from a priority to a value and instill a strong culture of safety throughout the Boys and Girls Club movement. And this is not just with Boys and Girls Clubs. I think it's important for all youth service organizations to really ensure that they're creating that culture of safety. And it's about involving everyone from the board of the directors to the employees, youth, and caregivers in that safety. And ensuring that individual and group behaviors are essential components when developing the safety culture. Along with the shared attitudes, knowledge, perception, and values, the organization can truly create a club or a youth service organization that safety culture is thriving. It has been and continues to be a journey for us, one that is aligned with our overall continuous quality improvement efforts. As you'll see in the presentation today, youth service organizations continue to grow our approach to safety as risks evolve and emerge, but also as societal expectations change. Over time, the definition of basic terms such as safe and appropriate continue to change. So must our safety strategies evolve. The prevalence of sexual harassment and misconduct is increasingly evident in today's environment and has highlighted the changing expectations of our entire society, including organizations, employers, employees, patrons, and key stakeholders. Organizations are now held to a higher level of accountability, transparency, and proficiency in combating sexual misconduct. Reactive practices that address sexual misconduct after the fact are no longer acceptable. Value-based actions require expanding the focus from triaging past incidents to intervening in real time to resolve issues, while also simultaneously putting safeguards in place to prevent recurrence. This includes strong, clearly defined response training and protocols. It also means moving beyond compliance to equip community members with skills and resources to recognize, stop, and when possible and appropriate, course correct inappropriate behavior before it can escalate. Why must youth service organizations work continuously to enhance safety policies, practices, and training to ensure they are centered on youth needs? Because safety is critical for children at every stage of development. As you look here at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, psychologist Abraham Maslow identified certain things that everyone must have, and this is really a familiar hierarchy that we utilize in working in youth development. Humans must experience a sense of safety and security before experiencing belonging, esteem, or achieving self-actualization. You can say that safety and security then are the foundation for positive youth development. Children and teens in the US are exposed to the highest level of violence and trauma, more than any other age group. And now during COVID-19, we've seen an increase in a lot of these things. But we know that when youth don't feel safe, they don't play, learn, and grow to their full potential. In fact, adverse experiences or traumatic events can interfere with or interrupt healthy development. Youth who are mentally and physically safe are better able to learn, grow, and thrive. And that's where youth service organizations play a real key role. We are the interrupters to ensure that youth really can learn and grow safely. In fact, many studies show that the most important protective factor to prevent and recover from the exposure to trauma and to build youth resilience is relationships with trusting, caring adults. Youth service organizations provide these safe, fun, positive relationships and environments that build a sense of belonging, opportunities for socio-emotional learning, and educational enrichment. At the center of every one of these programs are caring adults. In positive youth development, then, safety encompasses physical and emotional safety and risk reduction and emphasizes safe relationships and environments. It is therefore a core aspect of child well-being. Mitru, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Did you see me turn my mic on? Thank you, Lori. I just wanted to note that we're sharing a link to a paper that we wrote about ensuring safety in out-of-school time environments that expands on some of the concepts Lori was just discussing. Thank you.
No problem, Mitru, and I didn't even see that you had unmuted. Now let's talk about when we're talking about those safe safety in those adults, it really comes down to background screening, selection, and monitoring. So Mitru, do you want to discuss this?
Yes, definitely. I'll pick it up a little bit here. I'm just, excuse me one second. Yeah, just building off of what you were saying in the previous slide, Lori, that we know, and a big thing that motivates a lot of us to work in youth development is that we know the power of those relationships with trusted, caring adults and mentors. So that's segueing into our core topic today around screening and selection of those adults. And I just want to put this in a framework here that, we'd like to believe that most people who are motivated to work with young people do so for the right reasons. They may have had a mentor who changed their life. We hear that a lot from our Youth of the Year and other club alum. They may really love and care about young people and want to be part of that change and help them to have a great future. But unfortunately, there are individuals who don't have such great motives, and they can see a youth program as a target. They can see, they seek those vulnerabilities in youth programs. And what's sad about, of course, those kind of illegitimate or exploitive, victimizing behaviors hurt individuals, but they also hurt the youth serving organization. So when we think about child protection, we're also thinking about protecting our organizations and the out of school time movement as a whole. I love how in 2021 we're going to share with you a lot of great new resources that have come out. And I love how more and more I see youth serving organizations are speaking with one voice around our commitment to minimizing risks to children, holding offenders accountable, holding people accountable even for violating policies, inappropriate behavior. We're not waiting for things to escalate. But in addition to, when we say background screening, people think of background criminal history background checks. We also have to consider ongoing monitoring, supervision, rescreening of individuals, and a lot of other like day-to-day actions that we can take to make our organizations and programs safer. Next slide, please. I mentioned that we're fortunate that there have been so many great resources coming out in 2021. This is one of them that we'll share this link as well in a few moments here coming up. But this is a really phenomenal resource that fits into our topic today. It was developed by the U.S. Department of Justice Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services, or COPS office, and with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and Big Brothers and Big Sisters of America had a really strong role in this. So I'm really excited to see this come out early this year and to share it with you. It really reinforces a lot of points that we're talking about. And number one, it recommends that we consider layers of protection, layers of background screening in youth serving organizations. So we're going to dive into some of these today. And for instance, background screening includes nationwide, state, and local criminal history checks. So that's one application of the layered approach, but it also includes the written application, the interview process, and using behavior-based interviews. It also incorporates the reference checks and how reference checks are implemented and used. So we want to overall make sure that we're using more in-depth screening, that it's consistent, and that we are following through on any kind of findings or red flags. So next slide. Thanks. I'm going to share BGCA's, or Boys and Girls Clubs of America's, layers of protection as an example, how we can we can use a concept like this to create really a more systems-based approach to building that culture of safety. In these layers, it may be a little hard to read because there's a lot in there. It's kind of hard to limit your priorities in the layers, but background checks are one of them. Policies and procedures are one of them. But what I really want to express, and I'm going to ask you to imagine it with me, is this layers almost like Swiss cheese. Like if there's a little weakness or a gap in one layer, hopefully it gets caught in the subsequent layers that create the solid surface. So all together, these layers help to create a more comprehensive approach, and over time builds a whole culture of safety. So this new guide I was referencing also points out that same approach. There's no one strategy like criminal history background checks. There's no one strategy that will be key in protecting children and youth, protecting our programs and organizations. It's really, it's a system, and it ranges across all of these. So these are some of the things that we recommend and implement here. I go to the next slide. Okay. So this all sounds great, and we know we should take a layered approach to hiring, recruiting, screening, selection, all of that. But what are some of the challenges? And if you would like to share a couple of words in the chat box about challenges that you see or challenges that you experience, that would help enrich the conversation. So feel free. I won't respond to them all, but you can share. So we know that we're all very busy, even when we're not in a pandemic year. And we also know that in youth serving organizations or programs, we often wear many hats. Some of our programs are entirely volunteer run. Many of our programs, we don't have a dedicated HR professional or hiring professionals. Again, it's kind of like the additional job that certain people take on. So thank goodness for 501c. I know that's where we rely on their services a lot for questions that come up, and many youth serving organizations do. But because that lack of sometimes a clear process, a structured written process and protocol, lack of the dedicated HR professionals, all of those things can really be challenges to implementing the process in a more ideal way. So what Lori and I are going to recommend in this webinar is, you digest this information, download these guides, and find your starting place. Just start where you are, and that's really another key in safety improvement, right? We just want to keep improving, and wherever we are, rather than letting that kind of paralyze us or have a chilling effect, we just want to build out from there and continue to get stronger. Next. Start where you are. One great place to start on the previous slide is the application process. We can go back one. The applications are really a good starting point, or if you even want to take it a step further, as I was saying this, I was thinking it even starts in how you advertise the position. So we can make it very clear in all of our communications that, in our youth program or our organization, we don't tolerate abuse. We don't tolerate policy violations, and we have many layers of safety protection, and we're aware. Speak up, show that you're a very aware organization, so you can set the stage and show that our organization takes an aggressive stance when it comes to safety. Safety first is not just a t-shirt. It also is really helpful in your applications that you have consistent assessment criteria. So if the people, even if it's not a full-time hiring manager, it's also my job to help identify and hire these volunteers. Okay, so make sure that everyone in that role has the exact definitions of what information on an application might automatically disqualify someone. And make sure candidates know that as well. So people can self-select out We even do that like for one day special event volunteers, having a cleanup day or something like that. We have a handout that explains to them our safety policies, our expectations of people who are going to help with cleanup day, what we deem appropriate and inappropriate types of communication. And it's been surprising how many people might, opt out and say, I think I'm better suited to, another opportunity. And that's good. I know we don't want to have that chilling effect on volunteers, but to keep in mind, we do want to recruit the right people. Another thing that I experience sometimes in nonprofit organizations, we are very philanthropic. We want to help everyone. So sometimes we might consider, I think this position would be really good for that person. I think working with us would be really good for that candidate. I understand that kind of thinking, but we have to really flip that around when it comes to safety and emphasize for our priorities, will this person be good for youth? Will this person be good for our organization? That has to be um, the main criteria. Lori, was there anything you wanted to add there?
No, I really liked how you said, Mitru, that it's really about the youth, and that's our mission, is to protect our youth. So I really like that, sometimes we can find staff who it may be beneficial, but really we need to make sure that it benefits the youth at all times first, youth first.
Right, mission first, youth first. So along these lines, some of these things I'm going to say are somewhat basic. It would be helpful to download the resources and use those as a guide. So having written applications, have a series of interviews, right? You can start with phone, but make sure we meet the people in person. Make sure that additional people in the organization have input. I know people get intimidated by panel or committee interviews, but they can be very effective that way. The application, it also gives an opportunity for the organization to determine how truthful the applicant is. So that's another reason it's important to have that written application. You can cross-check that with things that come up in the criminal history check. I think because we're often very community-based also, we all need to keep in mind, just because this person is known in the community or came from a partner organization doesn't mean that we would skip our due diligence. And again, having the written application gives you an opportunity to ask follow-up questions in the interview process as well. Another great cross-check. Next. So that brings us to the interviews. I like interviewing. I think that, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about interviewing? Would be another question. Some people really dread it. I know it's very time consuming. That part is tough, but I think that effective interviewing is one in which we can really, I want to create a supportive environment, but not mislead someone, right? And or lead them to think that this is that, if I like them or if we have great rapport, it means they're hired. But I do want to create this environment where people can shine, where they can really feel comfortable to open up, tell us about their work history. We want to know what motivates them to work with specific age groups. We want to know if there are age groups that they dislike. We certainly want to know their experience, and that's where behavioral-based interview questions really come into play, so that we're learning how people have thought about, handled, made decisions about certain challenging issues in the past and how they would project, they would handle different issues, handle our policies in the future. So there's some great guidance and materials available to learn more about behavioral-based interview questions and how to conduct those. But the more that we create that environment of honesty, again, the better it really benefits everyone. And it benefits the candidate too, if we can determine earlier if this is a good match, if this is a good fit for youth work. And I'm going to tell you, I have asked people outright in the past when I was in direct service, you know, if they have ever abused a child. And I had people admit things to me. And then you can cross-check that again with the background check. But I remember a candidate who admitted something that wasn't going to show up on a criminal background check. So we ask questions designed to assess abuse risk. Part of that is also, I want to know how they feel towards policies, what their values are, how important do they see policies, when and how do you make exceptions to policies, those types of questions, because I want to know if they have appropriate judgment to be working with young people in our organization, and in our organization that takes a really strong stand around safety policies. So interviewing should also be a mutual process. It gives them a chance to get to know us again and understand that you know, we're not going to tolerate people making unilateral decisions and exceptions to policies. The next slide. And then reference checks are one of the essential layers, and everything I said earlier applies. We have knowledge of the person, but we've never worked with them directly. Well, we definitely would still do a reference check. We want to make sure that all of these screening processes are applied consistently across the board. So when it comes to reference checks, some of this I want to thank our friends at Presidium. We've learned a lot from them over the years as well, another great resource for you to look up. But we want to make sure you have the correct types of references. So in other words, don't only look to former employers or other places the person has volunteered. It's really helpful to have professional references and personal references, and to find out, you know, in which setting did the reference know the applicant. There are standard reference forms that you can use and you can adapt to fit your operations, which is what I would recommend, so that the questions, you know, make sense for you and get at what you really need to know. And of course, you want to take good notes. And I write quotes from the reference as well, because that will help me recall the conversation with the reference, and also I'll have that documentation if I need it in future meetings, either with the candidate or with my hiring team or my HR professionals. I added another link here because there's so much to say about this topic and we have so many questions. I want to refer to a wonderful resource published by the CDC on preventing child sexual abuse in youth serving organizations. And we're going to share that link. And can we go to the next slide as well? The exciting thing is the CDC is updating that document, so there'll be a new version coming out soon. But even the existing document you can access online, it has some really great examples of questions to ask during a reference check. Also, you know, people say, you know, what can we ask and not ask? I would call 501c services to get more information, because there are state-specific hiring and screening laws as well. So we always want to make sure, I know for us, we're a nonprofit organization, so we always want to make sure we have board review and approval of our policies and processes, and that our attorney has reviewed, and again, that, you know, we have looked to see that it's we're doing things in compliance with our state, tribal, and federal laws. Okay, as you know, as you probably realize, you can learn a lot of things from a reference. So I just mentioned a few questions that we might ask, and a source to get some additional questions to look at and consider that might fit your organization. But it's really about making sure we're doing our due diligence. We don't want to have any regrets later or take any shortcuts in the process. Can we go to the next slide? Here's the link to this wonderful new document that I mentioned, what you need to know about background screening. a reference guide for youth serving organizations and their communities. You can find it in the COPS office publications, but here is the handy link. So I want to keep in mind that if we do a comprehensive background screening beyond just the criminal history background check, we might uncover information of concern about an organization. I know we have what we call hiring exclusions, and you may call them something else, barrier crimes, they may be called. And again, the same statement about making sure that your barrier crime or hiring exclusion policy complies with all the relevant laws. But it's really important to have this consistent policy and implementation of a process for how will that information on these candidates be collected? How will it be processed? Where will it be kept? How will it be kept? And how is it used to determine the match here? If is an applicant eligible to work in this position or not? So I think these key points I drew from this manual in particular are really important ones. It's just failure to complete the screening process or to cooperate with the screening process. I think that provides a lot of information right off the bat. You know, not completing the application, not following all the steps, providing the resources. Of course, if you see in the background check, you know, you learn of convictions for any type of sexual crime, any sexual victimization involving children or others. History of violence is another common hiring exclusion, convictions that include violence. And then when you're checking with references, you might learn about some of these behaviors as well, and learn that someone was terminated for not adhering to policies repeatedly or for misconduct with a child. I mentioned earlier too, when we have written application and selection processes, it also helps us to cross-check. So we need to make sure, is everything consistent here? Do we find misleading information or inconsistent information? So those are some quick tips and a lot more easy to access information in the guide. Finally, and really, I think one of the very important issues in this topic is about sustaining our screening and monitoring practices. Let's keep in mind, you know, screening and selection, it's not a one-time thing. We really need to make sure that there's continuous performance review and feedback, you know, continuous supervision, guidance to help people develop, but also as far as the safety of our youth and our programs go, we need to make sure that we are continuously monitoring adult youth interactions, for example. So one way that we do this, and we recommend doing this, is have very clear policies around what your organization has defined as appropriate and inappropriate contact, and make sure we include digital in that as well. I think a lot of us learned a lot about this in 2020. There are a lot of ways that adults interact with children online, even through playing video games. You know, we have a policy prohibiting isolated one-to-one contact. That fits our operations, but that includes in texting or use of technology. So for us, it's simple. We just think of the rule of three. We make sure that it's never just one adult communicating with one youth, but we extend that, you know, to youth in our environment. We really try to eliminate those one-to-one opportunities among youth as well. So think about, and there are, again, great examples. You can review policies for the protection of youth. So think about the policies to be in place to put those controls in there that really help to decrease risky interactions and help promote monitoring of interactions. It's everything from how the space is set up, making sure there are sight lines, eliminating hiding places, that whole checklist, as well as I mentioned the virtual space, and then making sure that policies are really clearly explained, trained, reinforced. Another thing that I really like, and seems like people that in our trainings enjoy, are doing scenario-based training. We steal from the TV show, What Would You Do? So what would you do if? And it helps people to think through what policies would apply here, and also to work on continuing to build that see it, say it culture. We have some scenario-based training that also relates to speaking up if we see someone else violating our safety policies, not following our adult-child interaction policies. So this is another layered approach. All of these things really go together. Other considerations are think about, again, the type of operation and additional risk assessment, additional risks that might be there. So if there's transportation or offsite activities, one-to-one activities, those are areas where the monitoring may need to be increased because the risk is higher. If you have questions, we'd be happy to take them as I move right along here to the next slide. I wanted to showcase that Johns Hopkins University did some research, and many of our youth serving organizations participated and helped to develop this desk guide for youth serving organizations on how we can prevent and address sexual abuse in our settings. And this was a really great scan of all of these different safety policies and practices in place that resulted in these findings, and published as a website as well as a desk guide. So I hope you can see that I think there are really many resources and much guidance, as well as this great peer-to-peer support available for all of our organizations, no matter how large or how small. It's a part of our mission to make sure that we are continuously improving our safety efforts. As I think Lori mentioned earlier, safety challenges continue to evolve. So we really must never stop, and we will, every year these presentations probably look a little different. We keep growing, and I want to emphasize the great peer-to-peer support. I know I've benefited from that, and COVID, it was essential to talk to our peers at the American Camp and the Y and Big Brothers and Big Sisters. So, we're here for you as well, if there's anything we can do to support. We can go to the next slide, Lori. So this is one area I hope we can dive into more in several months or next year, but we've really been doing a lot of work and focusing on the specific needs when we're hiring youth workers. And Lori will explain this more and better and dive in deeper here to tell you what we're talking about. But she's going to address some special considerations when the people working in our programs are youth themselves. Lori?
Great, thank you, Mitru. Yeah, and all of the things that Mitru has already discussed apply to youth workers, but what are youth workers? Because youth can show up working at a club or at a youth service organization in a lot of different ways. And so it's important that your organization knows and understands what roles you want youth to play a part of. Are they a paid employee? So are they a minor who's a paid employee? Or are they a work-based learning participant? So are they, getting some skills and are part of the program, and also having this work-based participation? And as that, they serve sometimes as interns as part of the work-based learning, or as volunteers. It's also important when we're thinking of work-based learning participants of the age of the youth that you are having be work-based learning participants. And also, when we're talking about minor employees, they are, usually depending on the state, so you have to follow state labor laws, and 15 to 16-year-olds tend to be the starting age. So, and they do or do not have to be participants of your program. Whereas with work-based learning participants, we want to ensure that they are participants of your program. They are not doing work that is supplementing a employee, but they're actually gaining work-based learning and work skills, as well as some education along with that. And then we have volunteers that may be separate from the work-based learning participants, but many schools now require youth to do community service. So a lot of youth go to where they're familiar with, and so that's participating in different, volunteering at different youth service organizations. So it's important for organizations to really define these 3 different type of youth workers, and then determine what type of role they're going to play in your organization. One of the organizations that I worked with, we did not take any youth volunteers unless they were already part of our work-based learning program. They had to be a member, they had to go through the learnings and the meetings, as well as volunteering. So depending on what your organization's policies are, it's really, really key. And that really is important when you're thinking about youth workers. I just skipped a slide here. Oh, no, I didn't. Okay. When you're thinking about youth workers, there's really 3 different things that we're talking about. And I mentioned that quite a bit, right? Policies and procedures for youth workers, training and supervision, and then we have a work-based learning safety guide that I'm going to discuss in just a minute, that's in development right now. So policies and procedures are really key. First, defining what makes a youth worker, like I mentioned, and then making sure that your organization is really familiar with the child labor laws, not only in nationally, but in your state, and understanding that interns and work-based learning participants actually apply for a lot of the national and state level child labor laws. So making sure that you are still reinforcing those laws and making sure all staff do really understand that. Another key one, Boys and Girls Clubs, we have background checks for all employees. And a lot of people wonder, well, should you do background checks on minors? And our stance is yes, you still, our policy is for all youth or all employees to have background checks. So if they are an employee, they still need a background check, but it's important to understand that minors cannot sign legal documents. So parents also have to be a part of that authorization. So we need to make sure that we're bringing parents into that process as well, because again, youth cannot sign legal documents. And then this is a rough one, right? So our organization, as Mitru just mentioned, has the prohibition of one-on-one contact. How do you do that with youth workers, whether they be minors, minor employees, or whether they be volunteers or work-based learning participants? It's important for the organization to really spell out and understand that one-on-one contact, that means nowhere in the facility should two youth, whether it be a youth worker or an adult, should be alone with another youth. So making sure that you're really strong on that. And then also understanding that youth-to-youth interaction inside and also outside of the club or the youth service organization, making sure that they really understand what their roles are. And then how do you handle mandated reporting? In most states, we're all mandated reporters, but that's a lot to put on a youth. And so making sure you put organizations have policies in place to support the youth worker, because as we're looking at the policies and procedures for youth workers, our mission is to help all youth. and that includes youth workers. So we're not only protecting our youth workers, but also our youth in any of the policies and procedures that are developed for organizations. And really, training and supervision is so key. And there needs to be training for the supervisors. How do they interact with youth workers? One of our recommendations is to have group supervision. Like we mentioned, the no one-on-one contact. And so it's important to understand, how do you supervise youth workers then if you're not going to have one-on-one contact? And so group supervision is really the best way to ensure that that happens, or making sure that you're always, as Mitru had said earlier, having that rule of three. So having a supervisor and that supervisor, you know, in any meetings or in any chats or emails or things like that when corresponding with youth workers, whether it be employees, work-based learning participants, or volunteers. It's really important to ensure that you have that constant communication. And one of the things with youth workers is they also interact with other employees, right? And so making sure that all staff understand the roles of what a minor employee is versus somebody who's a work-based learning participant and an intern, so that you're not setting your organization up or the youth up for additional liability. And then there needs to also be training for youth workers, for them to really understand what their roles are and understand what they're taking on a lot by working in youth service organizations, a lot of liability, and making sure that they understand that, they understand their roles, and they have the support that they need. And so some of the topics are things like, your role as a youth-based worker, as well as what we mentioned, like mandated reporting. How do you be a mandated reporter and still be protected? Looking at child abuse cues, and also self-care. I think that's important, especially, that's a lot that youth are putting on if they're recognizing, the signs of child abuse. That's a lot to put on them. So how can they deal and cope, and teaching them coping mechanisms. Also with youth workers, it's sometimes that power struggle. How do you become, how are you interacting with the other youth in that you're serving? And one of the recommendations is that we say that no youth, if they're teenage youth workers, start no as volunteers or work-based learning participants, no less than a teen, and they can't supervise anyone who is at their age level, right? And for the younger, and that doesn't mean supervising alone. Oftentimes we do need to ensure that we're following also, again, state rules and state regulations. So, at Questions 501c has been a great resource for many youth service organizations in figuring out some of those child labor laws and things like that. So really it's about protecting our youth workers with policies and procedures, trainings for supervisors of youth workers, trainings for youth workers, and then we are also in the process of launching a work-based learning safety guide, so that the organization, supervisors, and youth really know what their roles and their responsibilities are, and really understand the sample policies and procedures that they need to have in place. Mitru, is there anything? I talked really fast on all of this. Is there anything you'd like to add?
I was just thinking about all of the many topics that we've really undertaken in the guide and in the training. To your point, right? I would hope that we want to protect all employees, of course, and make sure that they're prepared and equipped and supported for their role. And, and of course, we've given extra attention to when those volunteers, staff, and interns are minors, but I was thinking about some of the topics such as understanding your rights at work, right? You have an emerging workforce here, right? This is probably new to them, used to being in the role of student or recipient, but as someone who is now in the role of a worker, knowing you have rights at work, you have rights to expect a safe work environment. What does that look like? Being prepared for emergencies and disasters. And I know we also tackled topics like sexual harassment training and things, just again, realize this is a little different than just going to school in high school. And we just want to make sure young people understand that we have protections at work and we also have responsibilities in how we treat others as well.
Great points, Mitru. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, I think that's really key to say, we do have responsibilities and we have rights as well. I think that's really key in saying that. And, today we've talked about a lot. Are there any questions in the chat box that people may want more information on?
We don't have any questions quite yet. We'll give folks an opportunity to send us anything if they have any last minute questions. We do have a lot of, this is great, this is wonderful, wonderful information, way to goes, but we didn't have any questions yet. So we'll see if anybody has anything here at the end for you guys.
Great. Well, we appreciate that. We hope it's helpful, and hope you're able to access a lot of these resources and do some homework, spending some time following up with them and trying to engage others at your organization or program. And especially, I don't know why I keep emphasizing, I think I'm just very empathetic towards those who don't have an HR department or designated HR person. I mean, I remember how I learned a lot of these things when I was in my community-based organization, and I, learned by doing and literally going to other agencies. I worked with youth in my rural community at the time, and I would go to, let's see who else works with youth. Well, Head Start. Let me see if they'll share their policies, and so obviously by sharing and talking things through together is how we've all learned and grown to this point. So it's just really a delight to be able to share such high quality published resources now and have webinars like this where we can spend a few days this week really diving into the relevant topics. Lori, was there anything else you felt like we should elaborate on before we close it out?
I feel like we've talked a lot in a very short amount of time, but also provided a lot of resources. And I think something that you said, which is really key, and something we talked about earlier is, things are evolving. And so we need to also make sure that we're up to speed, that we research and bring in others to help us out, partner with other youth service organizations. Talk to them to see what they're doing to get ideas on how to really increase the impact of what we're doing with youth and ensuring that they're as safe as possible.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, that concludes the session for us. And again, we thank you all for joining today, and we look forward to more in-depth conversations in the future.
Great. Thank you, ladies, so much for your time today. Like I said, at the end here, we're getting a lot of thank yous and great jobs and great information. So I think you didn't get any questions because you provided so many resources. People are ready to dig in. So great job. And with that, I'll go ahead and say goodbye. Everybody have a great Friday and long weekend, and I will see you all next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.